I didn't think we'd be starting the Aetherdrift spoilers today out with a vanilla, but we are, and that's because it's actually a really interesting card, Kalorna Coral Tyrant. So I want to talk about this card today, along with a bunch of other cards that were announced for Aetherdrift, and yeah, let's jump into the video. Alright everybody, thank you so much for being here. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and click the bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos are posted. Just a quick thank you to everyone who does take the time to watch the videos. It is very much appreciated, each and every one of you who do, so I wanted to give you thanks. Now, Aetherdrift has been a set that I think people have had some mixed feelings on. I have to say, I very much like two things about it. One, I like some of the creativity with the designs and some of the cards themselves, and two, I like that they've managed to take vehicles, which in my opinion have either been very broken or just outright terrible. Like, generally speaking, most vehicles are fall into those two categories. There aren't a lot that are like, oh, this is okay. Like, you have strong ones like Reckoner Bankbuster and stronger ones like Smuggler's Copter, but then you also have like a lot of them that are cool but just not feasibly, usable. This set does a lot for both facets there, in my opinion. And so I like that, but I think there's also a lot of good non-vehicle cards as well, and I think it should have a very fun limited environment, so it'll be interesting to see what that kind of looks like and how it impacts limited, as well as, other constructed formats. But that's enough talking from me. Let's talk about Coral Tyrant here. So there are 5 vanillas in this set. For those of you who don't know, vanilla meaning no effects, effectless monsters, creatures, whatever you want to call it. My Yu-Gi-Oh brain gets mixed up sometimes there. And this one is really noteworthy because it is a 2-drop 0/8. Now, obviously, it doesn't have any abilities. However, in standard, mono red is a very strong deck, or Boros, or anything that can make use of the red ping spells, and a lot of cards in that deck are not able to get over this without either overextending significantly and getting rid of a lot of resources to make one play, or having, a very specific out like the double strike monstrous rage combo. But as a whole, this is just kind of interesting to think about that, like, it has potentially some viability if you're playing blue, simply as a way to either stall a turn and force your opponent to get rid of a bunch of resources, or just, have a big wall that, takes some time to get over, and that, those extra turns or turn can be make or break in standard, where it's as fast a format as it is. So do I think this card's going to have a ton of play anywhere? Probably not, but do I think it's got some niche uses and might really be worth a look in standard? It's definitely possible. It's also really going to be solid and limited, I think, just being a 0/8 that's going to be an absolute nightmare to remove. But yeah, it's kind of funny that a vanilla is actually attracting a little bit of attention. It's a pretty cool card. The Speed Demon is 3 and 2 black legendary creature demon with flying and trample, as well as start your engines. At the beginning of your end step, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is your speed. Now, if you're someone who's out on the speed mechanic, I haven't really seen it in play yet, so I kind of feel like it's a bit underwhelming, but maybe it'll be different in practice. I don't know. Pretty soon we should be able to start playing around with these cards, so we'll get a better sense of what's going on. But I mean, 5 mana flying trample 5/5 that could potentially give you draw power. Not bad, but it's still going to have to get at least 1 to be kind of useful. I just wonder whether or not in standard you have other options that kind of accomplish this goal a lot better, unless speed ends up becoming stronger. But like, I'd rather cast, a Sholdred for 1 less mana, or a Phyrexian Obliterator for the same amount of mana and get, potentially a lot more resources out of it. So it's a neat card. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's tied to a mechanic that I don't think is all that great, and that may be sort of where we get into a bit of an interesting scenario with it. River Churn Monument is 1 and a blue artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it to any number of target players, each mill 2 cards. And then it has Exhaust, 2 and 2 blue to tap any number of target players, each mill cards equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. Obviously, blue decks that are into mill are going to love this, but self-mill decks might like this quite a lot as well. It's very easy to get some consistent milling going. That Exhaust ability could be either a game changer in one of 2 ways, in terms of maybe getting the opponent very close to decking out, depending on how you've gotten them so far, or, getting turning your graveyard basically into a second deck and being able to get a bunch of stuff there that you can get access to. Just seems like a solid card. There are a lot of other cards that do mill, and so it's going to be fighting for, I think, opportunity with those cards, but I think as a whole, it's definitely a neat one, at least. Gas Guzzler is a 1-drop vampire rogue that has start your engines. It enters tapped. When it's at max speed, you can pay a black to sacrifice another creature or vehicle, draw a card. I don't love it. I get it. I get that it's a 2/1, but it enters tapped and is reliant on a slower mechanic. It's a vampire, so maybe there's that. I mean, if you have a way to get to max speed quickly, you can find ways to make this work, but as a whole, not a huge fan. I find it to be pretty underwhelming. And watch, there's probably one specific deck that can utilize this, and I'm missing something. But as it stands, I think it's, you know, below average. Just my opinion. Card that is very funny and very interesting is March of the World Ooze. And just for a second, take a look at this absolutely beautiful Japanese showcase version as well. It is a 3 and 3 green enchantment with creatures you control have base power and toughness 6/6 and are oozes in addition to their other types. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it's not their turn, you create a 3/3 green elephant creature token. This card is insane on paper. Again, we'll have to see how it plays out in practice, but being able to play some kind of token spam deck that can turn all of your creatures into 6/6s and then give you some additional resources when your opponent casts a spell, which, for the record, becomes 6/6 oozes when they come out, just feels really strong on paper. It's also not a legendary enchantment, so I guess if you somehow manage to get multiple of them out in Constructed, you could keep making multiple tokens. But I mean, this card screams Commander to me above everything else, especially with the ability that enchantments have to, you know, reduce costs. Obviously, you can also make copies of enchantments, so there's plenty of different directions in which to take it. But the artwork is incredible. It does have that really cool fracture foil as well. I'm glad this is kind of becoming a mainstay of sets. I think it's a really, really cool thing that highlights some really talented artists. And I know it's different than what people like with Magic specifically, but you can get your Magic-oriented art right here as well if you're not a fan of that art. But I think based on the pre-sale prices, which don't mean anything really, but do give an indication of where people are estimating things to end up, this is one that people do have some high expectations for. Cursecloth Wrappings, I love this card's artwork. It's so cool. Just want to put that out there. It's a 2 and 2 black artifact that says zombies you control get +1/+1. You can tap it to give target creature in your graveyard Embalm until end of turn. The Embalm cost is equal to its mana cost. So there are some cards that have Embalm where if you pay the cost, you exile it from the grave, and then you make a token copy that's a white zombie in addition to its other types. This is definitely really solid because of the ability to essentially duplicate stuff from your graveyard at its cost and, you know, getting rid of, well, making them zombies, give them buffs right off the bat, but maybe playing some non-zombie cards in a zombie deck and turning them into zombies to get extra resources does open up some fun kind of potential pathways. But I think it's a solid card. It's a little costly, so I don't know how it's going to be in terms of like standard application, but it's also, I think, just a really good option to consider. Thopter Fabricator, 2 and a blue artifact vehicle with flying. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and it has crew 2. Not a ton to focus on here. I love the showcase art, but if you're more of a fan of the regular art, that's pretty cool too. There are a lot of cards now that say whenever you draw your second card each turn, and a lot of them are blue. I wonder if there's some way to kind of make that work, you know, that you get like a ton of resources off your second draw. Somebody probably have to take a look at that, but it's a cool card, and obviously Thopters are getting some support here, and there are already, you know, a lot of decks that play Thopters or Thopter cards to maximize affinity for artifacts and things like that, so it's not bad, and it's probably going to be pretty solid in draft if you have a way to get extra draws, but then again, it is a vehicle you have to crew, so I don't know about that in terms of whether or not that's always going to be worth the investment. Explosive Getaway is 3 red-white sorcery. Exile up to 1 target artifact or creature. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Then deal 4 damage to each creature. It is a pretty good board wipe that is probably outclassed in Standard, but definitely has some application, I think, in Commander. Being able to get something off the board you don't want there and then just kind of sweeping hit a bunch of things. 4 damage isn't a ton. Blasphemous Act can obviously do this better, but it also does give you the ability to blink certain things and maybe get over other problematic cards. Worth a look. I do think it's solid, like I said, if you're playing Boros in Commander, but I do think there are cheaper options in Standard that do similar things. Just the benefit you have here, of course, is being able to protect your own creature. Is that worth it to you? I don't know. You'd have to make that distinction yourself. Regal Imperial Osor is a dinosaur. It is a dinosaur lord that gives other dinosaurs +1/+1. 3 mana for a 5/4 that buffs your other dinos. Pretty damn good. And I don't know what other dinosaurs are in the set that are going to be good with it, but I think Standard might have some very interesting dinosaur decks going forward, because I think this shines there. But of course, if you're playing a dinosaur commander deck, you'd slot this in. It's cheap, it's strong, and it gives you buffs. That's pretty much what you're looking for. Burnout Bastronaut is a 1-drop goblin warrior with menace and start your engines. You can pay 2 to give it +0/+0 until end of turn, and if you have max speed, it gets double strike. It's not terrible. A 1-drop red with menace, certainly going to be good if you did happen to get that in draft. The max speed mechanic makes it a lot less appealing, simply because I think that mechanic, like I said earlier, is kind of very underwhelming, but it can still buff itself, and with menace, it's not awful. There's definitely worse goblins in the set, so take that for what you will. My Mimeoplasm Revered One. This is some absolutely cursed artwork, but I'll be honest, even the regular one is pretty crazy. Happy to see another Ooze here, but this card is just really neat. It is X Black Green Blue, legendary creature Ooze. When it enters, exile up to X creature cards from your graveyard. It enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it for each creature card exiled this way. Then you can pay 2 to have it become a copy of target creature card exiled with it, except it is a 0/0 and has this ability. I love this. This seems like an extremely fun commander that has a billion different ways to take it, especially because being able to copy the abilities of things is awesome. And it'll have the counter, so it won't necessarily die. Just on paper, looking at it, I can absolutely see this being super fun and just maybe even kind of annoying to play against, because, you know, it can disrupt your playstyles just by getting stuff out of the grave that you need, and then also kind of fuck you with your own abilities. So it's a double-edged sword, or a double-edged Ooze, I guess. But it is a really interesting card, and I think it's going to be very popular amongst the players when it comes out. So just wanted to go over him. Gonti the Night Minister is 2 and 2 black, legendary creature, Aetherborn Rogue. Whenever a player casts a spell they don't own, that player creates a treasure token. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller looks at the top card of that opponent's library and exiles it face down. They may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast a spell this way. It basically turns your creatures into Ragavans, which is interesting. And then if you cast your opponent's spells, you get a treasure token. So there's a lot to like there. I think this card's actually really interesting. It's not super unique. There are a lot of other cards that are very similar in terms of their application, but I think it's good. I think it's low enough cost. And I think the fact that you can kind of take your opponent's stuff, and it's each time you hit with something. So if you have, you know, ways to hit consistently, get rid of stuff, and then have a lot of options to play, it's pretty good, and it's definitely a card I think will be, you know, viable in a few different places. Riptide Gearhulk is a card I actually made a video about, a short, so we've been posting some shorts reviewing individual cards. If you guys haven't seen those, feel free to check those out. Riptide Gearhulk, though, is a really cool card. This is just its variant art. I just wanted to show it off. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it because we already talked about it, but it's a good card. I definitely think it's one of the better Gearhulks in the set. And yeah, the artwork here is just kind of impressive as always, but I feel like that's sort of par for the course at this point. Unstoppable Plan is 2 and a blue enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all non-land permanents you control. I've seen this. This feels broken. This feels genuinely busted to me. I don't know. It may just be me. There are similar cards that do this, but not that typically cost as low. And even the ones that do are like maybe an instant that does it for 2 mana, but it's only once. This just untaps them all at the end of the turn, and there are obviously a million ways to abuse a card like this. And the fact that that blue has access to it should be very interesting, because it's probably one of the most consistent ways to untap things. And if you have a combo deck that taps stuff for mana or taps stuff for, you know, disruption or whatever, you have so many ways to do that. But it also just gives everything vigilance in a way, because your creatures will untap after they attack. So this is a really strong rare. I think this is going to actually end up being a rare that is very, very desired. And yeah, so that's my thought on that. And finally, Radiant Lotus. This artwork here is amazing. I just wanted to show this off. But in fairness, even its basic artwork is incredible. This card is a 6-drop artifact that says tap, sacrifice 1 or more artifacts, choose a color. Target player adds 3 mana of the chosen color for each artifact sacrificed this way. So if you tap and sack 2 treasures, for example, you can add 6 mana, which is kind of nuts, especially in decks that make a ton of food or treasures or anything like that where you have a lot of token spam. You just basically triple your mana, and this card essentially pays for itself after 1 turn, which is just kind of insane. And if you have a consistent way to generate these things, it's even better. I mean, it's not a legendary artifact, so theoretically you could play multiples, but I think it's going to get to a point where you're just going to be able to use it and kind of, especially in monocolor decks or things that have easy mana fixing, it's just a really strong card. And it does have a couple different variants. That artwork is incredible. Like I said, there is also the first place foil version. Looks kind of cool. The all yellow doesn't do it for me there. I think this one kind of has a better look, but maybe in person it'll look different. We knew they were going to be giving us a Lotus card. We just didn't know what it was going to be. And this is pretty strong. It's better than Timeless Lotus, which was in Dominaria United. And that card ended up being decently valuable. I feel like this is going to be a big chaser for the set. And I think the Fracture Foil one will likely be the highest performing card in the set. I'm just putting that out there now. We'll continue to talk about some of the financial implications of the set going forward in next week's videos and stuff. But yeah, it's Very exciting, and these are all some cool cards. Like I said, there are plenty of cards that were revealed. You can see them all on Scryfall. I think the majority is out now, but I wanted to focus on some of the more noteworthy things. I recommend checking them out. Let me know what you guys think of these cards, as well as any I didn't cover, in the comment section down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.